Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Plans Committee on Thursday, the 18th of September 2025 for Charnwood Borough Council. Please could I ask everyone present to please turn off your mobile phones or switch them to silent to ensure that the meeting is distraction-free. May I remind all those present that this meeting is being live streamed to the Council's YouTube channel and that by attending the meeting, you are giving your consent to being filmed. A notice with further information has been provided in the public gallery. Under the openness of local government bodies regulations, people may also film or record this meeting, and this is outside the Council's control. For those watching the live stream, the Planning Officer presentation has been published on the website for those who wish to view it, and it can be found on the agenda page for Plans Committee for the 18th of September 2025. Could I ask that members of the committee use their microphones every time they speak to ensure that the viewers of the live stream and recording can hear the discussion? First of all, before I go on to the speakers, I have to confirm that the Barrow application, which is items 5C and 5D, we have speakers who, due to an admin issue, were not actually written on the running order. One of them is Christine James, who is a Barrow Parish Councillor, who requested to speak, and the applicant, whose name is Peter Dutton. Speakers will be called forward at the appropriate time and will have 3 minutes to speak. When 1 minute of time is remaining, they will be advised by the Democratic Services Officer, Rebecca. For the benefit of those watching the live stream and members of the public here this evening, I would like to introduce myself. I am Councillor Lenny, Chair of the Plans Committee. Other members joining us on Plans Committee this evening are Councillor Fryer, Councillor Good, Councillor Haynes, Councillor Infield, Councillor Matthews, Councillor Monk, Councillor Palmer, Councillor Smidovic, Councillor Snart and Councillor Taylor-Durrant. Planning officers present this evening are Mr. Worley, Ms. Garbutt, and our lead officer, for the evening is Miss Tate. Our Democratic Services Officer is Miss Dobson. And I would also like to welcome Mr. Howarth, our legal advisor for the evening. We have received apologies from the Vice Chair, Councillor Curry-Loseley, and it is considered good practice to appoint a Vice Chair for the meeting when the position is vacant. Could I ask the committee, are there any nominations for a Vice Chair for this evening only, please? Councillor Smidovic.
Nominate Councillor Fryer.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Snart, thank you. Councillor Fryer, do you wish to take the nomination and join me up here as Vice Chair?
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm happy to do that. As you know, I will be stepping off the Vice Chair position for items 5C and 5D because I'm doing a joint statement with Councillor Forrest. So if that's agreeable and that's permissible, I'm happy to take the Vice Chair, but it needs to go to the vote.
You can't take part in the last two items then. Is that acceptable to the committee? Pardon? Please, can I have a show of hands? Thank you. Councillor Fryer, would you like to join me? Thank you, Councillor Fryer. Right, item 1 on the agenda is apologies. Ms Dobson, have we received any apologies?
We've received an apology from Councillor O'Neill, and Councillor Haynes will be substitute. We've also received apologies from Councillor Charles and Councillor Corey Losley.
Thank you. Welcome, Councillor Haynes, and thank you for joining us. Item 2 on the agenda is the minutes of the previous meeting, which are at the beginning of your package. Is the committee happy to confirm as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of August 2025? Please raise your hands. Any against? And I'm assuming the others weren't there. Thank you. The minutes of the previous meeting have been confirmed as a correct record, and I will sign them at the end of the meeting. Item 3, questions under committee procedure 12.8. Ms Dobson, have we received any questions?
I confirm no questions have been received.
Thank you. Going on to item 4, disclosures of pecuniary interest and personal interest. Ms Dobson, have we received any disclosures of interest?
I confirm I've received a declaration of interest from yourself, Councillor Lenny, in relation to item 5B, P21 2424/2, land off Hathen Road, Shepshed, as you spoke as a resident on the item in January 2025 and do not have an open mind. You will therefore be moving to the public gallery during consideration of this item. I've also received a declaration of interest from Councillor Fryer in relation to items P21 0759/2, land off Melton Road, Barrow upon Soar, and P21 0760/2, land south of Melton Road, Barrow upon Soar. Councillor Fryer called in the original applications in 2022 and is making joint statements this evening along with Councillor Claire Forrest. She will therefore move to the public gallery during consideration of these items.
Thank you. Are there any other disclosures of interest members wish to make? Thank you. So we move on to the main business now. Item 5, planning applications. The first item is 5A, number P/25/0293/2, Peace Hill Farm, Ratcliffe Road, Sileby. I would like to refer to our planning officer, Mr. Worley.
Thank you, Chair. Evening all. Yes, slightly unusual application in this case in that it relates to a permission we granted maybe 2 years ago with a series of conditions. One of those, which I think is probably fair to say set a high watermark for the way we've handled outline planning permissions, made a condition of having to adhere to a tree planting code, which was really quite comprehensive in terms of the tree cover that it would introduce into the site. So all well and good, or so we thought. But when Ms Jelson acquired the site and started to design it, adhering to this code, they hit something of a barrier because they found that the highway authority would not tolerate the design that was proposed in the tree code and would not have trees in the highway. And they tried to persuade them and explain why it's desirable and explained where this has come from, which is a line in the MPPF. But the Highways Department were not for budging, and they simply said not having it, frankly. So Jelson therefore went back a step and sought to reconfigure this tree design code so they could maintain kind of the quantity and the philosophy of the tree planting that was in the development, but doing it a different way, which didn't, which got around the obstacle they found with the Highways Authority. So what I've got on the screen just now is the differences between the two schemes. But rather than inviting you to sort of dwell on all that detail, the biggest difference and the main change, and indeed the change that's attracted the most attention, is that instead of having trees in the highway verge between the carriageway and the pavement, the highway verge would now be beyond the pavements and would not be part of the highway, hence no longer affronting what the Highway Authority have refused to deal with. So in other words, instead of going carriageway, verge, pavement, it will go carriageway, pavement, verge. And the net result of that is that the trees, same amount, same type, same maturity, all the rest of it, will be 2 metres further to left and right of the main carriageway than as per the approved scheme. That's in the main street of the housing estate. In the cul-de-sacs and the minor roads that branch off the main street, there's really not any significant change. It's the same kind of approach with things in open space and strips in front of the houses, and occasionally, and it really is occasionally, in people's front gardens. So the approved scheme did some of that as well. So that's a quick comparison of what was approved and how they're varying from it. They reassure us that not being on the highway doesn't make these trees vulnerable, because they would instead be in a strip that's past, it's called Manco land in the business, excuse the jargon. They would create a strip of land that isn't highway, because highways won't have it, and it isn't private land, so householders can't individually come and chop the trees down if they don't like them. It's in Manco land, which is part of the public open space for the development, so will be maintained in just the same way as the play areas and the parks and in this case the land down by the watercourse that we saw earlier. This, again, you will struggle to see this from where you sat, but this is just lifted and dropped from paragraph 9.1.10 of the report, and it's simply a comparison of the specification in the two approaches, the old and the new. And you can see there that the more you probe this, the more that you see the differences, apart from what I described about spacing out of the highway, are really not great. I'll put this on to reassure you that comments that we've received about there'll be less trees and there'll be less open space, that's simply not true. We're talking about the same amount of trees, more or less the same size, sometimes larger, just in a slightly different location, wider from the carriageway. And indeed, on the very first of those boxes, introducing trees into an area at the entrance to the site where we parked actually today, which weren't in the approved version, but would be introduced by the new version. So a little bit of benefit there as well. So the reason it's all in words and not in pictures and makes it harder to explain is that this was devised when there was no layout because of an outline application. So with some trepidation, I'm going to show you now what this would look like. So that is what was in the approved scheme a couple of years ago, just showing how the streets would work, and you can derive from that what type of trees there would be and the spacing that I've described about. And this plan, which is kind of the current agenda, is what Gelson's actual layout would look like once their approach, the new tree code, is applied to it. So the dots obviously being the trees. So when I was talking about something being new, that's this group of 4 here, and these would be particularly large samples. This would be their main street where things are a bit broader than they would have been had Plan A been pursued. So all that taken into account, there is a view, and you'll see it expressed in the papers, that the broadening of this avenue is a backward step. a dilution of the quality of the development. I'm not sure that I personally subscribe to that view, but it's all a matter of judgment. But what I can say with some certainty is, despite these changes, and you'll know other estates yourselves very well, this is more trees than you've ever seen before on any of the schemes we've approved over time and indeed recently. So despite what some people regard as a shortcoming, it's still taking us to a better standard than we've traditionally achieved. So on that basis, we don't think there's reasonable grounds to resist it. And hence the recommendation is to approve with just the condition adjusted to refer to the newly submitted tree strategy, tree design code, as opposed to the old one. So in this case, the outline planning permission had a string of conditions as long as your arm, basically. And the way these Section 73 applications work is that it's a new permission, so we need to reimpose those conditions if they're still relevant. And in this case, they're all relevant because none of them have been addressed so far. So every single one just lifts and drops into a new permission if it's granted. And the second thing is, I guess, for your reassurance as much as anything, the scheme had a 106 with all of the components that you're familiar with, like money for schools and community centres and so on, and the health centre in Sileby and things like that, library. All of that applies equally to a new consent if you grant it tonight, as it did to the old one, because there's a clause in the 106 that carries things forward when changes gets made. So just for your reassurance, we don't lose all of that stuff. And we don't have to reinvent it either, thankfully. It just automatically transfers over.
Thank you, Mr. Worley. We now have a speaker, Councillor Lawrence, who is the ward councillor. Do you want to come forward, Councillor Lawrence? You're going to keep it to 3 minutes. Okay, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to firstly highlight that the initial approval of outline plans for this site, confirmed in February 23, were decisions taken in the context of insufficient housing land supply across the borough. The tilted balance was therefore applied in the officer's recommendation to approve. The current local plan, the site is outside Silby's limits of development, and it is not actually a housing allocation even in the emerging local plan. Despite the building of the adjacent Ratcliffe Gardens estate, the valley formed by the watercourse that runs along the southeastern boundary of the site still retains the landscape character typical of the Wolds, as those of you on the site visit today will have seen. I therefore believe it's even more important than usual that the tree planting design softens the impact on the countryside landscape when viewed both from the village side, Ratcliffe Gardens side to the northwest, and from Ratcliffe Road and Humble Lane to the southeast. The Urban Design Officer's comments, summarised on page 18 of the reports pack, clearly describe how the approved trees code would achieve that outcome. Members will have noted that the Charlwood's urban designer and trees officers have both maintained their objections to the amended trees design code, now being proposed by Gelson's. Also, that local residents have objected to the proposed changes on the grounds that it will make the development feel urbanised and uninspired, rather than being an integrated and sustainable extension of the community. I'd also add that by removing the planting of suitable tree species that grow to a large size within the estate itself, the added benefit of absorbing more surface water and reducing flood risk would also be lost. I'd like to add a few comments about surface water drainage. I'd like to draw members' attention to the reliance in the approved outline plans on that unnamed watercourse that runs alongside the site. And that, crucially, further downstream, the watercourse runs between two other large development sites off Cossington Road, Sileby, and Main Street, Cossington. This watercourse has a very small capacity, and there is a lack of proper maintenance by neighbouring landowners, as exemplified by the fallen tree currently partially blocking the brook, presenting an increased flood risk to Main Street, Cossington, and in 2019, the internal flooding of the bungalow at 250 Ratcliffe Road, Sarby, due to a blockage in the brook. Despite this, all the three developers, Gelson's, David Wilson and Bellway, are proposing to discharge their site's surface water into this tiny brook. So residents, parish councillors and myself would therefore be grateful if members were minded to add a note to any resolution proposed this evening that would ask the three case officers to seek the local flood authority's urgent advice about flood risk from this brook across all three developments: Cossington Road, Sarby, Main Street, Cossington, and Pease Hill Farm, Sarby. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Can members please, if they would like to comment on this application, raise your hand to indicate.
The officer won't come back.
I don't think it was. I'm going to ask the Officer Jim Morley to respond to the objector.
Not to respond or to contest, just to I should have done this in introduction really, so apologies for that. Just to explain the rules of engagement for an application like this. When we get one of these, what are called Section 73 applications that want to make a change, we're only allowed to consider the thing that they want to change, which is why I dive straight into trees. It's not about revisiting the whole application and saying, do we still like it? Have things moved on? Was it the right decision in the first place? And questions like that. More formally, if I can refer you to paragraph 6.5 of the report, the words there are a very close reflection of Section 73 itself, which explains it in hopefully the manner that I just have. So we can only consider the impact that changing from tree design layout A to tree design layout B makes on the scheme. And I think the aspects that Councillor Lawrence spoke about were like flooding, for example, would not be affected either way by how close trees are to the road in the heart of the estate. So yeah, we're really quite limited in how far our evaluation can go in these cases, and in this case tonight.
Thank you. So turning now to committee members, if you wish to comment on this application, please raise your hand to speak. Can you hold them up a minute so I can get them? Anybody else?
Councillor Smidovic and Councillor Snow.
Thank you.
Smidovic.
Righto then. Can I hear first from Councillor Good?
Can I ask a question on page 18 that Councillor Lawrence referred to, the Charnwood Urban Design Officer? This plan also clearly states the trees will not be adopted, and also later on about another option maybe for the trees to be placed in owned vergers, taking on a maintenance licence to cultivate. On the previous application, were they going to be looked after, the trees?
Yeah, and there you've travelled to the very heart of the matter. So, yes, we imposed this well-intentioned a couple of years ago without, I think it's probably fair to say, without proper engagement of the Highway Authority, and therefore we're part of creating this problem. Because, as you say, those words were about, the word adoption means maintained as part of the highway. And when it came to it, Highways said no to that. It wasn't just that point, it was about the design as well. So their objections were multiple, and we weren't able to persuade them or adapt to convince them to take them on. So future maintenance of, it's a mix actually, future maintenance of the trees as they're displayed on the plan just now would be a combination of public open space, including these strips alongside roads, and a few, there really is not very many, in people's front gardens.
Do you wish to make another comment?
Is it possible for those trees to be maintained in some way on the planning permission?
Yeah, there's a condition on the outline that isn't being touched tonight, that requires the landscaping to be maintained, and if it dies, to be replaced. And that would apply to the developers if they were to build this out. But as you know, conditions stay with the land. So if you buy one of the houses on this estate, you then buy that responsibility as well.
Thank you. Councillor Infield.
Thank you, Chair. So at the visit today, I did ask if there were any restrictions on the trees. I seem to be assured that there wasn't, but the design officer has made a specific comment about trees within 6 metres of foundations in many places. And it says, this will inevitably restrict tree species selection if foundations are not enhanced and limit the spread and so on of the trees. So if we go forward with this, then I would want to see an obligation on the developer to put those structures in place to allow full-size trees to be planted rather than restricted size trees.
Mr. Worley.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair, again. Okay, so this is one of the reasons that I dropped this table into paragraph 9.1.10 of the report, because you can see, despite that concern, the size of the trees in the various streets doesn't vary very much from between old and new. In fact, there are some examples in the right-hand column of that table where they're actually bigger. There's an opportunity to make them bigger, more mature specimens than was intended a couple of years ago. In the detail of the actual design code itself, it's quite a weighty document, are drawings about how the root balls will be contained within cages so that they don't interfere with foundations on one side or the pavement on the other or anything like that. So it's quite a comprehensive document. That's common to both as it happens. They showed how it's going to be achievable. But that's what you've got on the screen there is the actual specification of the trees proposed by reference to their type of deciduous type of species and their sizes. And as you can see there, there's no great shrinking going on here. They're essentially a match for one another.
Thank you.
Councillor Snart.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Some of the things I'm going to say have already been put forward. I'm just trying to think about the trees now in the new layout, how close they are to the actual dwellings that are proposed. Because this seems to restrict the actual root spread and the reason why the trees will be smaller. So is there any, I mean, we've had all the bits around where they're going to be in dots. Is there any indication how close they are to the dwellings? What I'm interested in is that what's the legal point that we were talking about if they're in private land, and some of them are, what conditions have we got to actually keep those trees? Because if it's in private land, I would have thought you could do what you like with them.
Mr. Worley.
Thanks again. Yeah. Okay, so if we were in the office, I could scale from this drawing. There's a background to this. This is version D of this layout. And the versions A, B, and the changes from versions A, B, and C were all about moving the houses so they had sufficient gap between them and the trees. So the quick answer is they're about 6 or 8 metres away from the trees, from their front wall. Yeah, the thing about trees being in the front garden is of great concern, and it was common to both attempts to at this tree code in similar quantities as well. As I answered the question earlier, they are householders will be bound by that condition, but we appreciate there's a greater risk of someone one Sunday afternoon deciding that the tree in their garden is dropping too many leaves or casting too much shade, and before you know it, the deed is done. That's the value of keeping them to a low number, a minimum, and they're not meant to do it. So should that occur, we do, at least in theory, have enforcement powers to require replacements.
I'd just say that how we haven't got any conditions about that. Would it be a legal condition when they draw it up? Probably our legal man could just give me an indication of that. Thank you.
Yeah, that condition already exists on the outline planning permission, and that is one of the conditions that would be simply carried forward and superimposed onto this permission if you were to grant it.
And finally, if I may, Madam Chairman, the outstanding objections we've got here, are they still standing from the officers, the tree and urban design? And what weight should we put onto that when we're making our decision?
Thanks. Yeah, if I can take each in turn, the tree officer's objection was that the case for change wasn't made. But if you read through the full report about the lack of breakthrough with the Highways Authority and the need to do something different, that's the basis of the applicant's justification. They found themselves to be in a rock and a hard place, basically. Yeah, the urban design officers is more certainly between he and I is a difference of opinion. He regards this as a significant downgrading of the quality of the I don't know what's going on here of the quality of the development, and I don't. I think at the very worst it's a very small erosion of that quality. In fact, it could be argued, and right on cue I need to use the screen but can't. We're not plugged in or something. Is that even on? There's no light on.
Want me to go and get Steve?
There's a switch on there.
Yeah, it's not plugged in, look. That's the... If you... Oh, sorry, Jim. If you lift that flap up on the floor.
Thank you. It took me half an hour to get down there and about an hour to get back up.
So I now need Steve to set this back up. Yeah, flick the switch, that's it.
Tom.
I have to log back in and then I just
Oh,
need to
you're
ask,
joking, aren't you?
yeah, I just need to ask Steve where it is. Where it's saved.
Yeah.
So if you do.
Sorry, about to square one with the IT.
Please bear with us.
Thanks. There's even a little bit of gain to be had in the new approach, because these 4 trees here at the side entrance, which is which would spear off where we parked, coincidentally today. They're new introductions, and they would be trees of some substance. So a little bit of gain there to counterbalance any diminishment, if indeed you believe there is some diminishment in the first place.
Thank you, Mr. Worley. Councillor Snott, do you wish to come back with any more comments?
Just one comment, and I mean, it's not very often that we see planning applications come forward like this with so many trees on it. So there are benefits around that as well. So I understand that there are some reasons for the change, and probably detrimental to the actual over the site. But in terms of everything, I think I could go with office recommendations. Thank you.
Is that a proposal, Councillor Snott? Councillor Smiddavies?
I was only going to say it was really helpful going out to visit today and having it standing on the pavement and having it explained brought this to life. So I'm quite happy to second the proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Smiddavies. I'm now going to ask the committee to vote on the proposal by a show of hands for or against the proposal. For.
That's 10 for.
Thank you. Thank you all. We now go on to item 5B, which is number P/21/2424/2, land off Hathen Road, Shepshed. And I'm going to remove myself from the meeting for a while. Councillor Fryer, will you mind taking over?
No, that's okay. May I have your script? Make sure I keep to the script. Thank you, Councillor. We'll just take a minute while Councillor Lenny moves into the public area. Right, we're now on application number P/21/2424/2, and it's on starts on page 43 of your agenda item. I would like now to refer to our planning officer for the presentation, Mr. Worley.
Thank you. Sorry, me again. I've no idea how many of you were present when we discussed this. And for those of you that were, you'd need an exceptionally good memory anyway, because it was January. So, so I'm just going to do a quick recap. So the issue relates to 200 houses that are built on the eastern edge of Stathen. I did that last time, I remember, on the eastern edge of Shepshed, right by the motorway there. But what it relates to is actually in Hathen, that's where I got that from, whereby there was a condition on for those 200 houses requiring the junction right in the heart of the village to be upgraded because of the extra traffic that would be arriving there. And that's an aerial photo of it. And that improvement was going to look like this, which was to turn the single lane of queuing traffic into two, one for each direction. When we discussed it in January, you were unconvinced by the case made by the applicants and the endorsement of their case by the Highways Authority, and asked us to undertake an independent check with various expectations around the robustness of that work. For example, as it says on the screen there, not in school holidays where there's less traffic, and not just for an hour one day either. So it was for a full week, and we managed to squeeze it in just before the schools broke up in June. And our consultants use that data to do their calculations and reach their conclusions. So the conclusions and their report is all compressed into these three tables, which I think is the nub of the issue. So taking them from the top. The 2014 data is the data that gave rise to the need for this junction improvement in the first place. And as you can see there, what was predicted at the time from all of these new houses was that it would break the back of this junction, and the demands made of it would exceed its capacity, hence the figure of 101%. And therefore it needed improvement to cope, basically. But I understand the reason is changes further afield to the road network, but that's probably not that important. The why it's happened is probably not that important. When this application came to us, it was supported by a new report by the developers that revisited these junctions and came up with the figures in the middle table there, and said because of traffic taking different routes basically, and these houses were built by then, these 200, this junction was now operating perfectly satisfactory at all times of the day. As you can see there, 71% at worst. And they factored on some extra growth that we knew about to see what that would do. That's mainly the Garendon Park development, by the way, which is several thousand houses strong in its own right. And that grew it a little bit to 77%, so still well within capacity. 100%. The highways people get itchy at 90%, by the way, and 101% there. Fraud, basically. So anyway, so that took us to where we were in January. We had this information suggesting that the junction's coping after all. And then we've done this verification exercise, and our own people have checked it following a similar methodology. And you can see there as well that they also find that it's working well within capacity, 71% and 67% at the worst parts of the day. And they also factored in growth, because Garendon Park has still got several thousand houses yet to build, even though there's a couple of hundred up there. And that would grow it to those last figures, final figures on that screen, 76% and 72% of capacity at the busiest periods of the day. So on that basis, the initial assumption about why this junction improvement is needed has basically been overtaken by events. Something has happened a little further afield that has alleviated demand from this junction. And even though 200 new houses are using it from Shepshed, and several hundred to become 1,000 from just a little south at Garendon Park, the junction is still functioning, not just as it should, but really quite well. There's a lot of headroom left in there. So on that basis, we don't believe that the condition that required that junction improvement that I showed you is any longer necessary, any longer justified, to use the most important word. So our recommendation is to grant this application, let that condition go, basically, and just like the last one, it's a similar kind of application. All of the conditions for Shepshed will roll forward into a new permission should you grant it. Now, it's different in some respect because they've dealt with a lot of those conditions. So we don't get the full set transferring over. Some are done and dusted, basically. So in your papers, you've got quite a sort of detailed analysis about what's still in play and what's fell by the wayside. So the new set of conditions would be configured around only those that still haven't been dealt with, basically. It loses like 20 conditions on the way, which is good for bureaucracy, if nothing else. So that's our recommendation, to keep everything intact. The Section 106 provisions that I spoke about on the last application apply equally here too. We don't lose them just because we're changing permissions. And in any event, most of them are done. It was all about payments that have been received and spent and things like that. So that's the background to this, and basically an update, which takes us to the conclusion that I've presented tonight.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fawley. We have two speakers, Councillor Robin Pockley and Councillor Miriam Roberts. Could I just have a clarification, please, or could the committee, are you sharing the 3 minutes? So 1.5 minutes each? Or is it one statement from both of you?
2 minutes from myself or
Right, but if you'd like to both come forward.
Thank you, Chair.
And take the seats. So just, did everybody hear that? Councillor Pockley will be speaking for 2 minutes. Councillor Roberts will be speaking for 1 minute. All right, when you're ready.
Chair, fellow members, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. My calling was made previously on the grounds of highways concerns. When this item was last heard, a request was made for an update traffic study to be conducted, and tonight's papers referred to this. I have now had time to peruse the aforementioned report findings, which begins on page 43 of tonight's agenda. Paragraph 1.3 outlines the request made previously to have a further traffic survey conducted, and paragraph 1.4 concedes that the recorded flows at the junction are a little higher in the 2025 survey than 2022 survey at both AM and PM peak flows. Paragraph 3.1 on the same paper insinuates the original belief was that traffic would exceed 100%, and thus being the motivation to implement the Condition 16 clause. Now, the argument is being presented that this is no longer required. However, I would argue that sends out completely the wrong message about upholding previously signed documents which were signed with full knowledge of the request and requirements put before signatories. It also totally disregards the 34 letters of objection referred to on page 54 of tonight's papers. The wider question to consider is thus: if passed tonight, it could easily be argued that on any other planning application but before this committee, any similar condition on any development could at any time or moment's notice be contested by those who agreed to it originally. Moreover, it suggests that not upholding conditions residents once felt might be undertaken as part of any development, and particularly this one, is satisfactory. That's why I'm so disappointed it may be retracted. It almost feels like this should be non-negotiable and should be adhered to, almost a matter of principle. Therefore, I continue to agree with many of the sentiments put forward by my constituents about the highways implications that this condition being overturned would cause. I also strongly feel that despite it being suggested otherwise, the height of summer is still not the best barometer for a traffic survey when commuters often opt for other methods of transportation to their workplace in better weather. The position of this development is a main connection between us in Shepshed and Haddon, and thus traffic easing measures, however large or small, might mitigate the flow of traffic, especially at peak times. I will now hand over to Councillor Roberts to add her thoughts.
Thank you, Councillor Popley. Thank you, Plans Committee, for allowing me to speak. I'm concerned because if you round up the 75% that you just did on your graphs, you get to 80. And we know that Garrington Park is also going to grow. And I appreciate that the 250 houses are now built that went with this application. But long-term growth is still going to be long-term growth. And as my colleague has said, this is a planning condition. If we retract every single planning condition from every single planning application we have, we will end up with a planning free-for-all regarding our road structure. And it is also worth pointing out that the link road between Shepshed, Haddon and Loughborough is used primarily to get to work and to get to school. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Worley, did you want to come back?
Yeah, just a very brief point, a bit on like what I said on the last item of rules of engagement. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Poplar. It's annoying and frustrating when developer comes back and try and move the goalposts. But the law not just allows them, but makes specific provision in section 73. It's the same bit of law as we were dealing with half an hour ago. And section 73A to allow them to do that. And when they do that, we have to deal with it. In the normal way, which is to consider the merits of their request.
Thank you. Has anybody got any questions or points they'd like to raise? Right, so I have got Mr. Matthews and Mr. Bain. Haynes, sorry, Mr. Haynes. Mr. Snart, Councillor Snart, and Councillor Taylor-Durham. So, Mr. Matthews.
I'll keep this brief because I don't think there's a great deal that needs to be said about this. The results on the thing were on the survey are a little bit surprising, but I think extremely welcome. The junction's operating well within capacity, and I don't really see how we can argue with the results. We put our trust in those committed to completing the survey. And these are the results. The way I see it is that the junction doesn't need altering in any way, shape or form. And I think I wholeheartedly agree with the recommendations that we accept this on that we go forward with it. So I'm very much prepared to propose that we accept officers' recommendations on this one wholeheartedly. I cannot see a reason why we can't.
Thank you, Councillor. So you're proposing acceptance of this application following officer's recommendation?
That is correct.
Do I have a seconder at this time? Not. Councillor Snart, you'll have and then you'll have speak in a minute. I have Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Haynes.
Yes, Madam Chair. Something seems to have happened to reduce the traffic flow. It seems a little bit vague. Do we know what happened to reduce the traffic flow, and are we certain that it won't happen, that something else is going to happen to reverse the change?
Mr. Warning.
Yeah, deep in your papers somewhere. So appended to tonight's report is the January report. And deep in there somewhere, because I remember it, is the Highways Authority describing to us some road construction that went on a little bit north of Hathern that meant vehicles didn't have to go through Hathern in quite the same way that they had in the past. And that is what's alleviated the pressure.
Thank you. All right, we now have Mr. Councillor Snart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for housekeeping, page 47 is blank, and is there any more conditions after 8? Oh, sorry.
May I, Chair? Yeah, it's funny you say that because I spotted that yesterday and went, oh, where's all the conditions gone? No, that is the editing down of the conditions that I referred to. It had the effect of shrinking us from 30 or something down to the 8 that remain current.
I looked at the ADC Transport Technical Note, and it's quite comprehensive in terms of looking at the flows and such in certain directions. So there is a lot of information there. And that's probably why I was seconding the application. Could I just check? One of the councillors said we were looking at long-term growth. I don't think, in my view, when we're looking at this, we should be looking what's on there at the moment, and we shouldn't be looking at long-term growth. Am I correct?
There's an element of that. So these figures that are still on the screen, that the plus growth lines are the extra effect that the engineers believe will occur from known growth. And some of it is quite long term, like Garendon Park. That's going to be built for probably 10 years or something like that. What they aren't doing is speculating about what 2040 will bring, or 2050 or something like that, because it's just a finger in air at that point. But it's factored in, like for example, all of our allocated sites in the local plan are built into this calculation. So it's captured what we know, but not what we don't know.
Mr. Howard, you want to come back?
Sorry, yes, thank you, Chair. I think just to add to what the officer said, I mean, I think it needs to be remembered that conditions are there to mitigate the harm caused by the development itself. And obviously it has to meet all the tests, the main one being necessary in this instance. Obviously, you've had the traffic reports, they've come back, and obviously they show that there's plenty of capacity in both of those reports. So the argument would be that it's no longer necessary for that condition to be imposed on that permission. Clearly, if things change, and obviously, as the officers just said, growth is built into these matters, these calculations. Clearly, if there is further developments in the future, and obviously there is a need for further junction improvements, then that can be secured against that particular permission that comes forward. So,
Thank you. Councillor Taylor-Durrant.
Thank you. While I think obviously we can't disagree with what the report says, I do think it's a little bit frustrating that this was approved in 2014 and that's over a decade ago and the condition has not been met. And now, you know, we're looking at being able to change that now, but it should have been done by now.
So I'll have to be a little bit vague on the details, but I remember the condition concerned didn't give us a point in time. It gave us a point in the progress of the development at Shepshed, like the 150th house or something like that, which obviously can translate into time. To be fair to, that would have been about 2020, I would guess. And to be fair to the applicants, you might have noticed yourselves the reference number on this. They did start trying to tackle this in 2021. So a lot of the rest of the time is down to us, frankly.
Thank you very much. I see no other hands willing to talk. We have had a proposal that we accept officer's recommendation subject to conditions, and we've had a seconder. May I see a show of hands for? Again?
That's 8. Sorry, can you just have the codes again? My mic's not working, so I can't. Hi. That's 9-4, Chair.
Any against? Abstain? Did you want that rare noted?
One abstention, so the motion's carried.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We now invite Councillor Lenny to come back, and I shall leave.
Would we all be happy with a 2-minute comfort break? Well, 5-minute comfort break. Is that okay? See you in 5 minutes then. Thank you, members of the Plans Committee. Are we ready to start again? We're now on item 5C, which is number P/21/0759/2, land off Melton Road, Barrow upon Soar. And I would like to refer to our planning officer, Ms. Garbett.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is an outline planning application for up to 135 dwellings with all matters reserved except for access. It's land off Melton Road, Barrow. So the application has previously been considered at Plans Committee in December 22, and it was resolved at that committee meeting to grant permission subject to 106 obligations and conditions. A further report was taken to committee in April 2023, where that resolution was confirmed without amendment. This latest report is to update on material considerations. The report recommends that permission is granted, subject to amended Section 106 obligations and conditions. I'm just going to mention now that there is an extras report on this, which members should have received, which just sets out a few short notes, and as members all received a copy of the extras. Okay. In addition to that, we've also I'm also going to give a verbal update because we've also received some updated consultation responses from the Highways Authority today. So I will just provide a summary of that. If members do want to read a copy of that, we are happy to adjourn for 5 minutes if members want to actually read a copy, but I'll just verbally update and provide a summary. So the Highways Authority maintain the view that determining the application is premature and the application should either be not determined or refused. The response also refers to earlier comments and final observations provided on the application in July 2024. The response then sets out recommended conditions and Section 106 obligations. The response includes an updated Section 106 request for a contribution of £894 per bus pass, which is slightly higher than the previous consultation response. It should be noted that members have considered a similar consultation response at the previous committee meeting last month in relation to application HA44, where a very similar consultation response was received in relation to land north of Pollards Road, Anstey. So members are aware of the County Council's position in relation to prematurity. But if members do wish to see a copy of the consultation response, that is available to read. Are you happy for me to continue, or would you like to see a copy?
Members, let me know by raising their hands if they wish to see the Highways report before progressing any further with the officer's report.
Could I just ask, is it any different to what we've previously seen on the actual applications previously?
It's the same wording as was on the Highways response to the application considered last month.
Shall we accept that the officer's report continues? Could you show by raising your hand? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just going to introduce the application. So this is the site location plan. It's an application for up to 135 dwellings, all matters reserved except for access from Melton Road. The site is outside the limits to development of Barrow, but is adjacent to them in the adopted local plan. The site is adjacent to Millennium Park to the west, which is inside the limits to development. Land to the north is Brook Lane and Brook Lane Farm. To the east is a hedgerow with farmland beyond. There is a bridleway within the site, and this follows the western boundary. As you can see. And this just shows the site in the context of Barrow upon Soar. The site is an emerging allocation in the submitted local plan, site HA46, and the site is within the proposed limits to development set out in the local plan. The site access will be taken, sorry, that's the local plan allocation. You can see the limits to development go around the site. So the site access will be taken from Melton Road with a footpath link to Fishpool Way and a crossing point on Fishpool Way. Off-site works are also included to link from the Bridleway to Brook Lane and the crossing at Fishpool Way. The applicant submitted a development framework plan, which indicatively shows how the development may come forward, but this is indicative only at this outline stage. Members will have seen from the site visit today that the site levels rise from the road to a certain point and then drop again towards Brook Lane. There's roughly a 10-metre difference in levels on the site. That's the nearest property there at Fishpool Farm. So these are indicative site sections, just showing how the development could take place. So these are some site photographs. So this is the nearest roundabout junction onto Melton Road. So the site would be located on the left in that photograph, just behind the trees there. And this is Fishpool Way with the Millennium Park on the right-hand side. And this is the site itself. So that's the Bridleway, which was within the site. And that's roughly where the site access will take place on the left-hand side. It's a view from the Bridleway of the site. And within the site, just looking up the Bridleway. And then down again, and Melton Road is in the dip there. And looking towards Fishpool Farm. This is the Bridleway access from Brook Lane. So this is to the north of the site where the Bridleway exits onto Brook Lane. And that's where that lane then connects with Fishpool Way. So this is Brook Lane with the access to Fishpool Farmhouse. And then further up the lane, that's where the site will be adjacent to the lane with Fishpool Farmhouse on the left-hand side. Then looking up at the site from Brook Lane. So we did receive objections from Fishpool Farmhouse, which were considered in the April 2023 committee report, which is appended to the pack that you've received on the agenda. And the objections were fully considered in that report. And that's just a list of the objections that were raised at that time. In April 2023, members confirmed that the earlier committee resolution was confirmed without amendment. So the key considerations for the proposal are set out in full in the original December 2022 committee report, which is appended to the pack. So in terms of the principle of development, the application is to be considered under the tilted balance under 11D of the NPPF. The Barrow is a service centre where housing development is supported adjacent to settlement boundaries. The Barrow Neighbourhood Plan doesn't support further housing development, but the Neighbourhood Plan doesn't assess future housing needs or include a housing requirement for the plan area. The submitted local plan allocates the site for 130 dwellings as HA46, and this allocation carries significant weight, and the site is within the proposed limits to development of Barrow in the emerging local plan. Policy HA46 supports proposals that contribute to the reasonable costs of a new one-form entry primary school at Barrow to be located at Willow Road, which is HA48. The applicant has agreed to an education delivery strategy, which is again included in the pack as Appendix C, to secure a contribution to the new school and thus meet policy HA 46. The development will conflict with some current policies and comply with others, and comply fully with the emerging allocation policy. The development will include 30% affordable housing, and conditions will secure adaptable and accessible homes. Housing delivery is a benefit of the proposal. In terms of landscape and visual impacts, this is fully assessed in the application report from December 2022. Some minor adverse impacts were identified on landscape character, and major adverse impacts on views from local footpaths were also identified. The landscape officer made recommendations to mitigate the adverse impacts, including a green corridor to the bridleway and substantial tree planting, and these are secured by condition. In terms of design and layout, you saw there that there is a development framework plan where the open space is to the north of the site. There's a green boundary to the bridleway, and there will be an area of play area within the open space to the north. Layout and design are reserved matters for a later stage. In terms of ecology and biodiversity, the site does include existing trees and hedgerows, and the development would result in a net loss, and therefore compensation will be necessary. The extent of on-site compensation will be assessed at the reserve matters stage, and off-site compensation may be required, and this is secured in the legal agreement. Conditions require some secure retention of trees and hedgerows, creation of new on-site habitat, new roosting and nesting features, and sensitive lighting. In terms of amenity impacts, there are no near dwellings. The nearest dwelling is 140 metres away from the nearest dwelling as shown on the indicative layout. The conditions will secure national space standards, noise mitigation from Melton Road is required and secured, and a contaminated land assessment is mitigation is required and secured. In terms of highways, obviously we've got the latest consultation response, but the Highways Authority standards are met, and the local Highways Authority have suggested conditions and Section 106 obligations. The site accesses from Melton Road and off-site improvements and on-site improvements are secured by condition and 106. So in terms of Section 106 obligations, all of those are fully set out in the update report, including the updated 106 requests. That's included at recommendation A on page 83 of the agenda. A key obligation is the contribution to the proposed new primary school to be built in Barrow. And this cost is roughly £2 million from this development. This contribution is crucial to the existing primary school, as the existing primary school is at its maximum size and capacity. The Section 106 will secure that development will not commence until the school at Willow Road has been transferred, the school site at Willow Road is transferred to the County Council. And the 106 obligations secure that transitional provisions are in place to transport children to the nearest school if necessary, whilst the primary school is under construction. In conclusion, which is set out at page 81 of the agenda, the application is to be determined under the tilted balance in the MPPF. There are no objections from statutory consultees and no technical constraints. The Highways Authority have raised the issue of prematurity, but they refer back to their original final response from July 24, which includes the conditions and Section 106 obligations. The development is contrary to some adopted policy due to its countryside location, but the site is located adjacent to a sustainable settlement and it's allocated for housing in the submitted local plan, and this is given significant weight. There is harm due to the loss of some countryside, some landscape impacts and views, but this can be minimised by mitigation measures and secured by condition. The development of housing, including affordable housing, is a benefit of the proposal. So in conclusion, it is recommended that the application be approved subject to Section 106 and conditions as set out in the update report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms Garbutt. We now have some speakers on this item, and the first speaker I have is Peter Dutton, the applicant. Mr. Dutton, you have 3 minutes to speak. When you've got 1 minute remaining, our officer will let you know.
Thank you. Can I just say before I start, I'm going to be talking on behalf of this application and the next application as well. So I'm just proposing to speak once in connection with both, if that makes sense.
Is that okay with committee members?
Well, I've only got one speech, so.
You'll need to, if you want it to be considered on the next application, you'll have to say it all over again. That's the
Okay.
rules.
Well, I'll speak once and then see.
Then you have to do it again. Hi. Okay. So yeah, if you can, you've got your 3 minutes, so off you go.
Okay. Good evening, members, and thank you for the opportunity to address you today. As outlined in the Case Officers Committee reports, the proposals that are before you this evening were originally reported to Plans Committee in December 2022, where it was resolved that planning permission be granted subject to the completion of accompanying Section 106 agreements and planning conditions. The applications are now being reported back to committee to provide you with an update on material considerations that have arisen since the previous resolutions were made. In this regard, Gladman Developments fully supports the recommendations that your case officer is making to you today, which are unchanged from the December 2022 committee meeting, subject to minor updates to the proposed Section 106 heads of terms and sets of planning conditions. In that regard, the committee updates demonstrate how the application proposals continue to represent sustainable development in social, economic and environmental terms, and the principal development is deemed to remain acceptable in light of the material considerations and policy positions that apply in these cases. Notably, they also describe how the proposals are deemed to attract increased support from their alignment with the requirements and policies of the Council's Advancing Emerging Local Plan, which continues to identify both sites as proposed housing allocations. The previous committee reports recorded how there were no objections to either planning application from the Council's specialist officers or other technical consultees, and no material considerations weighing against the grant of planning permission. And the updates before you this evening highlight how this continues to be the case. In this context, the committee updates record how Leicestershire County Council have no objections to either application in relation to the issue of mineral safeguarding. At the same time, additional technical work completed by the applicant and independently reviewed by the Council's appointed consultant has confirmed that an area of worked gypsum beneath part of the south of Melton Road site does not pose a constraint to its development. In that vein, British Gypsum have also confirmed that they do not object to the planning application for the south of Melton Road scheme. Having taken all relevant material considerations into account, the Case Officer's overall recommendation is that the positions and conclusions reached in the original Plans Committee reports remain applicable. In that regard, the planning obligations that have been prepared to accompany the applications have also been updated to make provision for the latest Section 106 sets of terms, with the expectation they can be finalised in the very near future. These obligations will continue to support the delivery of a new one-form entry primary school to serve Barrow-upon-Soar, including a proportionate contribution to the land and build costs for this project, and include transitional funding for a finite period of time during the new school's construction if this is deemed to be necessary. Your case officers concluded that on balance, there remain no unacceptable impacts or harms that would justify withholding planning consent. The benefits of the proposals would be significant, and when combined would include the provision of up to 185 market and 80 affordable homes, increasing the availability of housing in a sustainable, accessible location at one of the borough's identified service centres, in accordance with the preferences of the forthcoming new local plan for the borough. In this respect, I respectfully urge members to follow the case officer's recommendation and re-endorse the resolutions that were previously reached. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dutton. Our next speaker is Councillor Claire Forrest, who is the ward councillor. Oh, hold on. Sorry, I've got it out of order. The next speaker is Councillor Christine James for Barrow-upon-Soar Parish Council. You have 3 minutes to speak, and when you've got 1 minute remaining, our officer will let you know.
Good evening. The population in Barrow in 2001 was 5,082. In 2021, it was 6,825. And by 2030, the population is expected to be in excess of 10,000. The existing infrastructure and services in Barrow cannot support the continuing increase in population. Another 900 dwellings are expected in the village. The cumulative effect of development and consultation comments made by Barrow Parish Council have been largely ignored. When developments are built, the Barrow Health Centre will be over capacity. The NHS has confirmed to the Parish Council that the current surgery does not have scope to extend to accommodate the increasing population. A satellite surgery is essential. No provision has been made on either site. The Parish Council has requested a contribution towards a multi-purpose building to allow for sports and social interaction. A feasibility study has been carried out and the parish has a location for a hall, but this request has been ignored and there is no provision in the Section 106 agreement for a contribution. Footpaths, pavements and cycle routes must be upgraded and provided from the developments to the village and to adjoining cycleways to ensure sustainable transport. Bicycle lockers are required at the village centre and at the station. An increased number of people will use the train station. To ensure equality, a contribution is required towards an accessible lift from the highway to the platform and for other improvements at the station. Yet Network Rail have not even been consulted or given the opportunity to request a contribution. The Section 106 agreement should be returned to officers to reconsider the contributions to be made directly to the village, and Network Rail should be consulted. The policies in the neighbourhood plan, comments from the Parish Council and requests for infrastructure improvements and contributions to mitigate the impact must be included in the Section 106 agreement and not be ignored. Local people must have a voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. Our third speaker on this item is Councillor Claire Forrest, Ward Councillor, who will make a statement on behalf of herself and Councillor Fryer. You have 3 minutes. Do you want me to go through the rest?
Hello everyone, I'm Councillor Claire Forrest and I'm here this evening speaking on behalf of myself and my fellow councillor, Councillor Fryer. So, the ship has sailed and we accept we're getting new developments in Barrow. However, they will bring with them a further impact on the infrastructure in Barrow, including the surgery, the schools, public transport, parking and the library, which the Parish Council significantly funds. We could talk to you about the road network and flooding, but it's too late. We could tell you about the sewage coming up in people's gardens just down the road from this development, but it's too late. We want the new residents to feel part of the community, our village, or should that be our small town? But to do so, we desperately need the resources of a small town, a service centre. We need a satellite health provision, a village hall for social activities like brownies and yoga, sports facilities, a sports field with changing rooms, childcare provision, open spaces, parks, extensions to our pavements, jetties and cycleways, S106 funding for community facilities such as public toilets, and to support the work we already do to integrate new residents. These developments must contribute towards a resilient and vibrant local community. We want new residents to love living in Barrow as much as we do. But these new developments must be integrated into the village to avoid ghost estates where people shuttle in and shuttle out and who are isolated from the rest of our community. We support the requests from our residents and the parish council. New residents deserve healthy lives in a healthy, resilient community. Please send the draft S106 back to officers to reconsider the requests made by our parish council. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Forrest. Would the officer like to make any comment in light of the speaker's comments?
Oh, sorry. Just a minute.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to go one by one as I scribbled them down. If I miss anything, can you let me know? So in terms of the comments received from the parish council, they have been summarised in previous committee reports, and every comment that's been received from the parish council has been considered. In terms of the NHS contribution, the update report sets out that the NHS have requested that their contribution is revised. So the sum is the same, but they've requested that the scope is widened. So it might be for Barrow, it might be for another location within the vicinity of the development. So that's the request from the Integrated Care Board, and that has been set out in the update report and has been agreed with the applicant as SIL compliant. In terms of the original parish council requests, they were considered in the December 22 Planning Committee report, and it was determined that the requests, the evidence that was included within those requests was not SIL compliant, so we couldn't include those requests within the 106 agreement. So the requests were considered at that stage. I've not received to this application any revised requests with any further evidence for this application. In terms of footpaths and cycle routes, in terms of this application, the bridleway, within this application site will be upgraded as part of the development, and there will be links to adjacent routes and adjacent footpaths. In terms of the train station accessible lift, I think that was included in the parish council request originally in December 22, and it was considered that that wasn't SIL compliant in terms of the evidence that was submitted at that time. Network Rail are not a statutory consultee for this proposal, as it isn't adjacent to their railway line, so they're not a statutory consultee, so wouldn't have been consulted. In terms of neighbourhood plan policies, the relevant policies are identified in the committee report and the previous committee reports, and have been considered as part of the application. Thank you, Chair. Is there anything else? No. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Garbutt. So now, if you would like to comment on the application, please raise your hand and indicate. Just the one. Any more? Oh, Matthews. Okay. So I think we'll go with our first speaker, Councillor Smidovic.
Thank you, Chair. Page 77, I wasn't on this planning application at the time, but I was really quite surprised on point 8.15. It says it's the the latest mapping shows the site remains in flood zone 1. Well, I would have been surprised if it had suddenly changed from flood zone 1, and it's subject to surface water flooding. I think you mentioned, or the officer mentioned when they were showing the photos, that there had been a request from somebody whether you had a photograph with the gates, and there was a comment made by the, I think it was the farmer or house owner. That was the picture. I mean, you can see the water there on a main gate, but the whole site is going to be built on flood zone 1, is what I'm getting from this. So that was quite a surprise. So what are they going to do in mitigation? I mean, it's going to keep flooding, and it's going to be flooding worse, I would imagine.
Ms Garbutt.
Thank you, Chair. The issue of flood risk was considered in the original December 2022 committee report. Flood zone 1 is the lowest risk of flooding. And so the main issue that was considered was the surface water flooding. So in the original committee report, it details that we received advice from the lead local flood authority and that they were satisfied with the proposed drainage strategy for the development. Obviously, it's an outline stage at this point, but they are happy that we have no objection.
Actually do anything about it? Or
So do you mean in terms of the footpath here, or?
yes, if it's a problem, I don't do anything about it at all.
So flood risk of flooding, so there's a low risk. And in terms of this footpath here will be upgraded as part of the, in terms of surfacing and things like that in as part of the development. And the site itself will include sustainable drainage to ensure that any flood risk is not increased. Sorry.
Councillor Enfield.
Thank you, Chair. So it was interesting to listen to the Parish Council input, and I'm quite sympathetic to their desire to integrate this development into Barrow in a functional sense. So I have a question, because I didn't quite understand. When the various things that they listed that they would like to see, it seems that these were rejected because they weren't SIL compliant. What exactly does that mean, please?
Okay, so I'm looking at page 129 of the agenda, which is the section of the original December 2022 committee report, which considers the section 106 requests that were made at that time. And looking at paragraph 12.18.6 at the bottom of that page, that sets out that the parish council requests were not considered to be SIL compliant. And if we turn to page 126, paragraph 12.18.1, that sets out the relevant policy. And halfway down that paragraph, it says, it basically summarises what SIL compliant means, which means that the request must be it must be necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms, directly related to the development, and fairly related in scale and kind to the development. So if a request doesn't demonstrate those things, it's considered not to be SIL compliant. So when those requests came in, there was insufficient evidence to demonstrate that they were reasonably related and necessary to make the development acceptable.
So is that in part a reflection of the scale of the development in relation to the scale of other developments in Barrow that would support such facilities?
Just bear with me while I get the original requests in front of me and I can talk you through it. So on page 100 of the agenda, which again is the December 2022 report, there is a summary of the parish council requests at that time. So on page 101, to summarise, the section 106 requests were towards highway improvements, new primary school, new community centre, village centre car parking, health centre and community library contributions, improvements to the railway station, public toilets in the village centre, foot and cycleway links to the site, village centre and the rail station, and school places, notice boards, defibrillator, seats, bus shelters, litter bins and grit bins. So quite a long list of requests were made. So in terms of section 106 contributions that have been secured, we were able to secure highways improvements because the evidence was provided by the County Council in terms of the need for that. We are able to secure a contribution to the new primary school, which is circa £2 million. There was insufficient evidence provided in relation to the new community centre. There was insufficient evidence provided in relation to the village centre car parking, in relation to how that need has been created by this development. Improvements to the railway station, again, there was insufficient evidence provided that this development was causing that need rather than it being an existing need or an existing deficit. Public toilets in the village, again, a similar reasoning that this development is not necessarily creating that need, that is an existing need. Footway and cycleway links, obviously there is an upgrade as shown on the screen here, and within the site there is an upgrade as well to link to existing infrastructure. And then there is a contribution to school places at the secondary school. And then in terms of notice boards, defibrillators, bus shelters, etc., again, evidence from this development that those were necessary and caused by this development is what was needed in terms of evidence that wasn't provided. The 106 does secure new bus shelters, and that is included in the section 106 because the Highways Authority provided the evidence for those. So I think that covers everything, hopefully. Okay.
Can I ask now that Councillor Snart make comments?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Can I just turn to the points around the new school, primary school? I understand it won't be built on this site, and it looks as if it's determined, or it depends on 4 other sites. What happens if it falls down, and especially the Willow Road primary school will be built?
Thank you. Sites shown on the screen here. So this application 46, the primary school is planned for HA 48. So that's where the school will be located. The developers of these sites have all agreed an education delivery strategy in terms of how they will share the cost and the provision of this school, which is needed to serve these developments. And that was agreed at the time of the December 2022 committee. So that is a part of your agenda pack, is Appendix C, which is the education delivery strategy. So this site will contribute a proportionate contribution, which is roughly £2 million. That contribution will need to be paid before the development can go ahead, but also the land on HA48 for the school will need to be transferred to the county council before development can commence on HA46 on the application site. So in the update report, it sets out that we have applications on HA48 currently, and we have 3 live applications on HA49, which isn't the whole of the site, but it's quite a large part of the site. So we have applications in, and the developers, like I say, have all agreed to this education delivery strategy. So we have live applications. There is a reasonable certainty that these developers will go ahead and these developments will go ahead. And obviously HA45 is the next item on the committee agenda as well. So my understanding is that these applications, the application on HA48 is nearly ready to be determined and will be coming to a forthcoming planning committee before the end of the year. That's what the case officer has advised me. So these applications have been in for a while. The developers have been working together on this strategy and have agreed a way forward to deliver. It's in their interest to work together to deliver the school so they can all proceed.
So just to on this, so if the actual development of this site cannot go ahead until all the money, 10 million, is actually in the pot, is that what I'm saying?
That's not my understanding. The £2 million from this site, plus the roughly £2 million from HA45, plus some money from HA46, 48, plus the land for the site. Once those 3 things are in place and the land is transferred to the county council will forward fund £2 million towards the school. So there will be sufficient funding available to start the school construction. And that strategy has obviously been agreed by the county council, because they've agreed to forward fund, and they will recoup that money when the later developments come online. But they are forward funding to ensure the delivery of the school.
Just one other thing as well, if we're looking at the NHS and where it was described earlier on, and I noticed it says, for example, a new healthcare facility. Why didn't we actually do the same as we did for the school and put all the monies together so we could build a new health facility? Is there a reason for that?
The ICB request is for improvements to existing facilities. So that's the request that has been made. The request hasn't been for new infrastructure on a particular site in Barrow. So we only take account of the request that's been made.
I don't really want to labour this, but it just say a new healthcare facility, and this is from the NHS.
Councillor Snott, could you say that again with your microphone on?
And looking at the NHS on page 79 in the first block, it does say, for example, a new healthcare facility. Well, the only way you'll get a healthcare facility is to put all the monies together like we have done for the actual highway. So I just think that we missed a trick here.
Sorry, Chair, if I can just intervene. The actual request is to use the contribution towards current or new primary community care healthcare infrastructure that will be directly impacted due to the increased population linked to the housing development. And then it goes on to say, for example, a new healthcare facility. So that's the request from the statutory consultee. The council can only consider what has been requested, and in terms of whether it's still compliant, whether an obligation should be secured by the Section 106. It can't insist upon a certain type of infrastructure that has to come from the statutory consultee.
Understand that, but you probably understand my point of view that we're missing a trick in terms of we're doing it on the school and we're getting a nice brand new school. Now we could actually put all this money together possibly and have something similar in a new healthcare facility, or we heard tonight they can't actually improve the ones there. So it's going to be a bit difficult for the people of Barrow. And I'm just trying to be, if you like, well, get the best for the people of Barrow.
Through you, Chair. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Snart. I would just like to point out on page 85, which is the recommendation A, and includes the 106 heads of terms. So the 106 heads of terms that are suggested in relation to the NHS contribution, which is just over £90,000, is worded as follows. Is requested to increase the capacity of Barrow Health Centre or other primary community health care facility that serves the development. So that is sufficiently wide in scope. So it could relate to an existing facility, it could relate to a new facility. So either option is available to them if they do have a new facility planned in the future. This contribution could go towards that.
Could I just ask if we could put a note on the conditions and just actually emphasise that could be part of a condition to say that could be one of the ways forward to help the people of Barrow. I think it came up quite heavily in terms of the people talking, and I think it's worthwhile doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, I don't think that we can actually condition that. Do you mean an informative as opposed to a condition? Thank you.
Councillor Matthews.
Yeah, so listening to the arguments from the public gallery, I have to say I do echo what Councillor Infield said. I do have a lot of sympathy with the parish council and the people of Barrow, and they make some very, very valid points. Just a couple of quick questions about the school. I mean, some of these may have already been answered and I've missed it. How many places will this school hold? I'm sure it's probably in there, but I can't find it.
It's a one-form entry school, and I can't off the top of my head remember how many places, pupil places that is, but it's a small primary school.
Yeah, that's not a lot, is it? The 2 million quid. Also, as well, you talked about HS48 and the applications that are going on there. You said that they were making haste going through and whatnot, but you can't guarantee that. You said that that would likely pass and that, but you can't guarantee that. And you were talking like you could. It just, I don't like hearsay.
Through you, Chair. These are allocations in the emerging local plan, and we do have live planning applications on the sites. And the developers have worked together to agree an education delivery strategy. So we have a reasonable certainty that all of these developers are committed to bringing these sites forward, and you know, as committed as they can demonstrate with live applications.
Okay, that's fine. But for the record, reasonable certainty doesn't work for me. I need guarantees. I need things to be in place. I don't do too many nasty surprises with things like planning. There was one other thing, time frames. How realistically quickly could this school be built if everything went like clockwork? And what would the worst case scenario be if it didn't go like clockwork in your assessment?
That's a difficult question to answer because I'm not from the local education authority. In terms of all the developments coming on stream, so if we grant outline permission, you then need that outline permission to be issued once the 106 is agreed. You then have a reserve matters stage, which is a further application of the detail. So all of the developments are in that position at the moment. None of them has a permission secured. None of the developments can go ahead unless that school site is transferred to the county council. So all of the developers are in the same position. They can't start until that primary school has permission. So there won't be houses going up on the site until that school is transferred to the county council and the county council has that money to build that school ready for those children. So that's the way that it's been worked out. In terms of there may be a gap between when the school is ready and when the first children are ready to go, you know, the first houses are occupied and there's children in those houses who need a school. So there are transitional provisions in the 106 to secure that those children are transferred to the nearest available primary school if needed, if that school is not ready. And again, that's a 106 contribution from the developer to ensure that those children have a primary school place.
Okay, just one final point as well. The bridle paths. You said that there would be a green boundary with the bridle paths. Could you just give us a bit more detail on what that exactly undertakes? How big is this boundary going to be? Exactly what it's going to look like, if possible. Bridle paths is not something that's passionate to me, but it is to a lot of people, especially people who live in Barrow. So I think these need to be looked after at all costs, in my view.
Thank you, Chair. So at this stage, we haven't got the detailed layout and the detailed landscaping details because that's for reserve matters stage. What we do have at this stage is the suggested conditions set out in recommendation B, which starts at page 85. So in terms of the conditions that have been suggested and are recommended, so condition 5 sets out that there will be a requirement for the layout at reserve matters stage to include a green corridor along the bridleway. So at that stage, we'll consider what that would look like. It all depends on the layout and where the houses are, how much of a green buffer that would be. And then obviously we've got other provisions within that same condition in relation to the retention of the hedgerows, tree-lined main access road, etc. So we've secured in principle that will happen. Exactly what that will look like will be for the layout and landscaping issues to be considered at reserve matters stage. And obviously that's when the public or anybody else who's interested has an opportunity to comment on those draft proposals when they come in.
Councillor Haynes.
Do we have any information about the County Council modelling on how many students the primary schools, well, how many more students for the primary schools would be generated across the entire of the developments of Barrow? Do we know what spare capacity there might be in the existing primary schools? And if there isn't existing capacity in those primary schools in Barrow and the new school, when it eventually gets built, do we have any idea how far the children from Barrow might have to go to get to a primary school if there aren't sufficient places?
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the County Education Authority responses, they set out in detail what the current levels of provision are. And so they will say whether there's any existing places left in the existing primary school. In this case, they've said there's no places at the existing primary school. For any further development that's going to take place in Barrow, we do need a new primary school. So that has been considered fully through the local plan process in relation to the County Council agreeing the scale of the development around Barrow and agreeing the scale of the school that's required in terms of the number of pupils per number of dwellings proposed, if you see what I mean. So the number of dwellings proposed in these 4 allocations equals a certain amount of primary school aged children, and there's one form entry school will be sufficient to cover those numbers of dwellings.
I have trouble picturing how, I mean, we've got 135 new houses in this particular plan. There are a similar number in the one that's coming up, and there are others. I have trouble seeing that that number of houses is not going to generate more than 180, which would be years 1 to 6, 30 student entry in a primary school, plus presumably some early years provision, and I can't think quite how many you'd get in the early years. I have trouble thinking that's not going to be more than that primary school can take. And I know what the County Council is saying, I just have trouble believing them.
Thank you, Chair. We take our advice from the Education Authority, and they provide us with their consultation response based on their up-to-date information of how many children are on the roll, how many children are expected in terms of birth rates and all of that kind of thing. They are the experts and we take their advice. The 4 allocations and the size of the primary school have been considered through the local plan process, through the examination, and there are no outstanding objections in relation to this allocation. So that process has taken place, and those issues have been fully considered through the local plan process because this is an allocation.
Anyone else got any comments they wish to make? Councillor Good.
I have similar reservations as regarding the schools. The thought that this development will only get a school if other developments actually are passed, and we do not know, with all the goodwill in the world, we do not know if they're going to pass yet. So I do have those reservations too, but I also want to double check about this surface water flooding, which Councillor Smithowitz mentioned. We know that it's got the surface water flooding already. Do we know if there's any provision for like the air bricks that lock to stop the water coming that has been planned in? Because it's easier to plan them in to a building as opposed to retrospectively fitting. Because we know that that issue is there already. Is that planned into these?
Sorry, I missed part of your question. Is that in relation to the dwellings, did you say?
Yes, the dwellings, the surface water flooding that is there already. Seeing as the developer knows that the surface water flooding is there, have they planned in the locking air bricks on the building so that the buildings aren't going to flood with that surface water that is already there?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. So the detail will be considered at the reserve matters stage. So, for example, where you've got surface water flooding issues, you would expect that the dwelling finished floor levels would be above the flood level, and then any infrastructure such as air bricks or sockets, things like that, would be above the flood level as well. So that kind of thing is planned in, and floor levels would be considered in detail at reserve matters stage.
Thank you. Any more comments? I'd like to make a comment. You talked about a £2 million from this site to the new one-form school. Is that for just this site, or does it include the next door site over the road?
Thank you, Chair. Right, I can point you to the education delivery strategy where this is set out. So the education delivery strategy is at page 153. And paragraph 3, it sets out the allocations and the number of dwellings that those allocations are expected to provide, which is a total of 723 dwellings. And then if you scroll through a few more pages, pages 157 and 158, it sets out the contributions from each of those allocated sites to give you a total of 10.8 million, which is the total cost of the school plus the land value as well. And then at paragraph 30, it sets out the contributions that have been agreed by the relevant developers for each of those sites, and it points out that HA 48 is adjusted to take account of the fact that they will be contributing the school site. So their contribution is slightly lower than the other allocations because they're providing the land. So each of the developments will contribute proportionately depending on what number of dwellings and whether they're providing the land or not.
Thank you, Ms. Garbett. Any other comments by any members of the committee? Right, I think we need to move on then to, has anyone proposed, I don't think we've had a proposal to accept or not officers' recommendations.
Madam Chairman, could we just ask through you, just the recommendation that we're going to actually vote on tonight? Seems to me that it's all around the recommendation A and B, but we've talked about other things going through. So if we could just be sure of what we're actually agreeing to tonight or otherwise.
Which page should we be looking at, please? The recommendations are recommendation A on page 83 and recommendation B on page 85. There's quite a long list of conditions attached to both of those. Do I have a proposal?
Well, I don't want to sit here, but what I say, and I can only go on what's been said tonight, and the officers assured us that the county council are okay with the school recommendations. If that note could be put in about the actual pooling the monies for the health centre, I think there's no reason for me to not say that I could propose officers' recommendation, but it's with a heavy heart because I find it very difficult, and I think the parish council outlines some of the difficulties that villagers are experiencing that are coming forward with a lot of housing without the infrastructure. And it's not just Barrow. I sit here for some time now, and I've seen ones coming forward saying the infrastructure is not right. And I hope we can take a note of this tonight and say that we've got to look seriously at the information we're getting, and we should question it well in terms of the way that we're going forward with these plans and the infrastructure that's necessary, especially in the villages, because they are taking the brunt of the development that's going ahead at the moment. So with that heavy heart, I say that I can propose officers' recommendation.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Monk. Right. All those in favour of accepting the proposal to accept officers' recommendations A and B? Yeah.
That's 5, Chair.
All those against?
That's 4, Chair. So the motion is carried.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I just say that's only 9 people. We've got 10 on the committee.
I beg your pardon?
Sorry, Chair. Should that be recorded as an abstention then?
Yes. So we'll move on now to item 5D. Would anyone else like a comfort break? Just for 5 minutes? councillors, we're on our last planning item, item 5D, number P/21/0760/2, land south of Melton Road, Barrow-on-Soar. I would like to refer to our planning officer, Ms. Garbett.
Thank you, Chair. Right, so this is the site on the other side of Melton Road in Barrow. It's an outline application for up to 130 dwellings with all matters reserved except access. So again, this item has an extras report which members have received, and we've also got a verbal update in relation to the County Council comments that have been received today. Would you like me to go through those again, or are you happy that they were covered under the previous committee application? Okay. Thank you. So in relation to that revised County Council response, again, on this application as well, they've revised that contribution request for the bus pass contribution, and that's a revised request for £894 per pass. So that is also relevant to this application as well. So this application, again, has been to Plans Committee previously in December 2022, where there was a resolution to grant permission subject to 106 obligations and conditions. This latest report is an update on material considerations. The report recommends that permission is granted subject to amended 106 obligations and conditions. So this is the site south of Barrow, which committee members saw on the site visit today. The site is on the outskirts of Barrow, but it is opposite Millennium Park, which is the limit to development as it currently stands in the local plan. There is a tree belt to the western boundary with Seagrave Nurseries on the far side, as you can see on that aerial photo. To the south is a hedgerow boundary and the footpath I-23 and the countryside beyond. The eastern boundary is unmarked and is adjacent to a farm track with a hedge boundary beyond that and open fields. So this is just the site context. You can see the site there highlighted in red and the public footpaths indicated in green. The site is an emerging allocation in the local plan, HA45. And that emerging allocation has significant weight due to its progress through the local plan process. In terms of site topography, the site rises from Melton Road to a high point and then dips again. So when you're on Melton Road, you can't see the hedgerow boundary to the south. There's approximately a 16-metre difference in topography throughout the site. So again, a development framework plan has been submitted, which shows how the development could be roughly developed. So with a Suds Pond to the north, adjacent to Melton Road, the housing development in the centre, and green space and open space in the centre and around the edges to soften the development. And the site access would be from Melton Road. As you can see, that shows the context of the site opposite, where the site access is going to be located. And so the accesses aren't opposite each other, and you would have separate lanes that would allow access to the developments separately. A footpath link would be created to cross Melton Road and link to Fishpool Way and create a crossing across Fishpool Way. And in addition to that, off-site works are proposed to upgrade the Bridleway, which is shown in purple there, and footpath links to Melton Road. And the green public footpath to the south of the site would link to the existing development at Barrow, and that footpath link would be upgraded as part of the off-site works. So this is looking from Fishpool Way at the existing Seagrave nurseries. So the site would be adjacent to that tree belt. And that's the tree belt on the right-hand side there, and the site on the right-hand side just behind it. And then looking at Melton Road, you would have the application site on the right in that picture. And this is the existing bridleway, which is outside the site but adjacent within that tree belt. And this is the view from the southwest corner of the site, where you can't see Melton Road because it's in the dip. So this is from the edge of the site. And this is the site when viewed from the public footpath, which is just outside the site. And that's the southern site boundary, which we couldn't see from Melton Road on the site visit. And that's the view towards Barrow from the footpath, with the site on the right. And that's the view from Melton Road, showing the site topography rising, and then the site boundary is just over the lip of the hill. And again. And then this is the eastern site boundary, which doesn't include the track, and you can see that the site boundary isn't particularly defined at present. And then that's looking at Melton Road with the site on the left. So in terms of key considerations, it's a similar situation to the previous application in terms of the principle. The site is not adjacent to the limits to development of Barrow as it stands, but it is an emerging allocation and is within the emerging limits to development in the emerging local plan. Barrow is a service centre where housing development is supported, and the site is close but not adjoining the boundary. The Barrow Neighbourhood Plan doesn't support further housing development, but the Neighbourhood Plan does not assess future housing needs or include a housing requirement for the area. The site is allocated for 130 dwellings, and that is the current proposal. Again, this site, in the emerging local plan, the policy states that the proposals will contribute to the reasonable costs of the new one-form entry primary school at Barrow, and this site will also make a contribution. The applicant has agreed to the education delivery strategy and agreed the figure that they will contribute towards that new primary school provision. So the development will conflict with some current policies and comply with others, and comply with the emerging allocation policy and other emerging policies. The development will include 30% affordable housing, and conditions will secure adaptable and accessible homes. In terms of landscape and visual impact, that was considered in the December 22 report. Again, there was considered to be minor adverse impacts on landscape character, major adverse impacts on views from the local footpaths, but again, these would be reduced by mitigation measures. So again, the conditions are securing tree planting, open space to the elevated areas, and tree protection. The development framework plan shows that the built development will be mainly within the centre of the site, with the edges of the site softened to the countryside edges. And layout and design are reserved matters, so the detail will be at a later consideration. In terms of ecology and biodiversity, the site includes existing trees and hedgerows. The development would result in a biodiversity net loss, and therefore compensation will be necessary. The extent of compensation will be assessed at reserve matters stage, and compensation is secured in the legal agreement. In terms of amenity impacts, there are no near dwellings, and conditions will secure national space standards for the new dwellings, noise mitigation from Melton Road, and contaminated land assessment and mitigation as well. In terms of the highways comments, we've been through those already, and they are similar on this application to the previous application. The Highways Authority refer back to their previous comments of July 24, where they recommend that the development can go ahead subject to Section 106 obligations and conditions. There will be off-site improvements to add a 2-metre footpath link along Melton Road and off-site improvements to footpaths to connect to bridleways and existing footpaths and connect to the settlement of Barrow to the south. In terms of this application site, the new matter that is included in the update report relates to minerals. The applicant has submitted a minerals resource assessment and a stability assessment. So the site is within the minerals safeguarding area for gypsum, and part of the site has been previously mined for gypsum. So the applicant submitted details to discuss those matters in detail. The Minerals Local Planning Authority and British Gypsum, who own the mineral rights for the site, do not object to the proposal and have considered those assessments that have been submitted. The council received specialist independent advice on stability, and the advice that we received is that the site is considered to be at low risk of subsidence. So that slide there, if you look at the slide on the left, that shows the safeguarding area for minerals, and on the right, that those little white squares indicates the area that has been mined for gypsum. So in conclusion, the update report recommends updated Section 106 requests from the County Council in relation to education, highways, waste and the Integrated Care Board, and these have been agreed by the applicant. The school build cost has been agreed by the applicant, and the development will provide a proportionate per dwelling contribution. The conditions have been updated to reflect the emerging local plan policy, which now has significant weight. So in a similar vein to the previous application, it is recommended that the proposal is approved subject to those recommended amendments to the conditions and 106, which were previously agreed in the December 2022 committee meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Garbett. We now have some speakers on the item. I have Mr. Peter Dutton as the first speaker. You wish to decline the opportunity to speak on this item? It's up to you. I think it's up to you. Shall we move on then and ask for the speaker, Christine James of Barrow Parish Council. Do you need me to remind you of the 3-minute rule?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, good evening again. I've got to say I haven't actually prepared anything to speak about this development because what I've said previously applies to this development as well. But I would say that being SIL compliant means that the requirements need to mitigate against the impact caused by developments. It's got to be necessary, directly related and fairly related in scale. Barrow is getting 900 plus houses. Our population will increase by 33%. That has got to have an impact on the facilities in the village. And we do need some help to mitigate against that impact. We talked previously about Village Hall. The current village halls in the village are not large enough to accommodate an increase in the population. We have carried out a feasibility study, and we do have land on which to build a community hall. If the council requires that information, it can ask and we can provide that information if that's what's needed. I'm glad that the councillor here talked about the health centre and why can't we pool the contributions. We can pool the contributions, but we need land on which to build the satellite surgery. And the health authority's proposal to spend the money elsewhere is not going to mitigate against the increase in population. Most people want to go to the doctor's surgery where they live and not have to travel. In the case of the train station, in the interests of accommodating people who are disabled, elderly, people with pushchairs, that lift is required from the highway to the station ground. The only way to access the station at the minute is down steep stairs. The Network Rail may not be a statutory consultee, but that doesn't mean to say we can't consult with them. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Our final speaker is Councillor Claire Forrest, Ward Councillor, who will be speaking on behalf of herself and Councillor Fryer. 3 minutes, Claire.
Thank you very much again. Okay, I'm back again. Much as I said before, all of that again. But I do have some additional comments. Some of them are little bit random, but let's go together. Hall Orchard School, our current primary school, is one of the biggest primary schools in the county. It's very large. And as a service hub, we take on the overflow from the world's villages like Seagrave and Houghton and Walton and Burton. We are under no illusion that the first day that that school is open, it will be full. It will be full on the first day. I don't see how it has any resilience for the future. Again, one random point to make. Another one I wanted to make was that, again, we have a lot of development coming our way, but each of our needs must be dependent upon the size of the development. But as you can see here tonight, we don't have one large development, we have two. So that reduces the amount that we are able to ask as an appropriate allocation to the size of the development. And this is something which is very difficult for us to come up against. The people who move to our village are going to need facilities. We have said that we want a new village hall, but the reality is Barrow does not have a village hall or indeed even a town hall now. We have churches, we have a facility for the over 55s, we've got a scout hut. None of them are within 1 kilometre of this development. All of them are further. The allocation gives us money for sports facilities, thank you. But all of our places that we could use that money is more than 1 kilometre. The land at Willow Way is S106, prevents us from putting any additional facilities. And the facilities at King George V, our World War I remembrance site, only has room for a half-size football pitch. If we are to extend the facilities for these new people, we will need new facilities, and we are reliant upon you to provide us with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Forrest. Are there any comments you wish to make, Ms Scarpet?
Sorry.
Through you, Chair. I'm just looking at the comments. So in terms of the new school being full on the first day, again, we take the advice from the local education authority on that. So, you know, that's not something that we can comment on directly. We go on their advice. They, like I said previously, the allocations have been through the local plan process. The size of the school has been planned through the local plan process to be a one-form entry to serve the new developments. So that process has been fully considered by the county council and has been through the local plan examination. In terms of the current facilities in the village, the development cannot contribute to an existing deficit. It can only contribute in terms of SIL contributions, SIL compliant contributions to any need generated by the new development. So if there is an existing lack of facilities, then that is an existing situation which this development can't solve. It can only add facilities that it creates, if you see what I mean. So, you know, this number of dwellings will create a need for X infrastructure on top of the existing deficit that is already there. But the contribution that can be required from this development is only proportionate to this development itself. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you. Shall we take this now to the members of our plans committee? Does anyone want to make any comments or ask a question? Please raise your hand. Councillor Good.
Can I ask about on page 191, number 26, regarding the Suds Pond? It does say to establish a suitable maintenance regime that may be monitored over time. Who will be responsible for the maintenance of that, and how will it be enforced to make sure it's performing correctly? Thank you.
Thank you. Ms Scarpet, do you want to respond?
Thank you, Chair. So these conditions will need to be formally discharged by the applicant. So, for example, condition 26, which relates to the long-term maintenance of the surface water drainage system, prior to occupation of the development, the developer would need to provide information to us that provide for an acceptable maintenance regime. So at this point, I can't advise you what that would be, but the developer would need to do that before any of the dwellings were occupied. So it would be up to them once the scheme was fully designed at reserve matters stage. They would then need to fully consider the surface water drainage strategy and how it will be maintained and managed in perpetuity going forward.
And would that involve enforcement of some sort by the council?
The way that it works is that once that maintenance regime is approved, that the developer would need to accord with that, and if they didn't, that would be when the enforcement team would get involved.
Thank you, Councillor Good. Our next speaker is Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Chair. It does seem kind of crazy that these are two developments by the same developer, and we can't put those two together to the number of houses that are being created by the developer. We can't put those two together to get a better 106 agreement. And Councillor Forrest did mention about 900 new dwellings in Barrow. And I just wonder is there a tipping point where a conurbation gets a percentage increase whereby these infrastructure, these structures cannot be built at that time? You know, is there a tipping point? And is there any way you can negotiate a better 106 deal? Basically, is what I'm saying. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. So in terms of the development that is proposed by this proposal, it will be part of the other development that will take place around Barrow in the planned development. So the only contributions that can be sought from this proposal are in relation to its impact. So the update report sets out the Section 106 contributions that are applicable to this proposal, and there are a lot of Section 106 obligations that have been secured. So recommendation A on page 182 sets out all the contributions that will be provided to education. So that's primary, secondary, post-16, special schools, and early years childcare. So it's not just the primary school. There's lots of contributions to these other education facilities. And then obviously we've got contributions to the libraries, waste sites, the NHS contribution, open space contribution, affordable housing, highways improvements, and biodiversity mitigation. So the development is providing a lot of Section 106 contributions and to mitigate its impact. I can understand the concern that there will be a tipping point at which no further development could take place if certain things didn't happen. And the case in point here is the primary school. If these developments don't go ahead, that primary school can't go ahead. They are reliant upon each other. So that's a good example of, where the development is necessary to deliver the new infrastructure. Do you see what I mean? So in terms of, and I understand the concerns regarding the village hall and the other infrastructure that the parish council have requested. I think the problem that we had when this application was considered in December 2022 is that we didn't have the evidence to show how this development was contributing towards those problems, proportionately. We can only ask for a proportionate contribution, and it has to be linked to the need from this development. So it's all about evidence and ensuring that we have that evidence in front of us to demonstrate that it's a SIL compliant request.
Yeah, thank you. It seems like there needs to be a bit of a change in the system.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Councillor Smidovic.
Thank you, Chair. I do like Barrow as a place to go to, but tonight, listening to everything, I've thought, what would put me off living in Barrow? And there are a couple of things. It's partly the flooding that occurs just on the way into Barrow. And we keep reading about page after page about mitigating this and mitigating that. But when I think about some of the roads that are going in, it's been going on for years and years and years, and it'll continue to go on for years and years and years with flooding. It's going to be worse now because there are going to be more houses, and that's going to displace a certain amount of water. So that worries me. I read somewhere, and I can't find it now, that Barrow suffered something like 52 days of rain. Was it last year? But recently, there's somewhere in this I've read that. And I know how many times the councillors themselves have come to meetings and said, sorry, we were late because we couldn't get out of Barrow. And that's still happening on really rainy days, that they're late because the traffic is mounting up. Because that's the only route will be through Barrow onto Coates for some of the roads. Coates floods as well. Parking. We haven't heard about parking tonight, but I did read about the highway improvements at pinch points. So it reduces down to 30 miles an hour. It's going to take an awful lot of time to go through at 30 or even less, and then be backed up for Lord knows how long. So parking and flooding still worry me. And the other thing that worried me on the mining aspect, I know we had that explained that it was a certain amount of depth until the mines were encountered. But the risk is minor. It doesn't say there's no risk whatsoever, but certain of the houses will have problems getting insurance, and they will have problems getting mortgages. So is there a little fund that's going to be given to them to be able to live in the house? So there's more concerns I have than positives on this one. And the fact that the land is going down, it's tilting down, I just think, is that going to create more water, more problems? So that's all I'm thinking about at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Smidovic. Do you wish to respond, Ms Scarlett?
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of just looking at my notes, the traffic around Barrow, obviously we take advice from the Highways Authority on the impacts from this development, and the Highways Authority have considered the transport assessment that was submitted, and they provided their final comments, which they've referred back to in their latest comments. And they recommended that the application be approved subject to condition 106. So they've considered the cumulative impacts of the proposal be impacted. In terms of parking impacts, again, the Highways Authority have considered that as part of their consideration of the application. And in terms of the mining that has taken place underneath the site, already. You know, we do not have control over things like mortgages and insurance. We can't be involved in that. That's not a matter that the planning authority can get involved in. So that is obviously for the developer to consider and people who purchase those houses to consider. What do you want to say? Sorry, just to add, in terms of the flooding issues around Barrow itself, those issues are existing issues, and this application has dealt with the potential issues that would happen from this development. So that's the advice that we get from our consultees, the Environment Agency and the Lead Local Flood Authority, is how will this development make sure that it doesn't make a situation worse, or ensures that this development doesn't create any problems. So that's the advice that we get. We can't consider existing problems elsewhere. You know, on the other side of Barrow, for example, it's not in relation to this development. Thank you.
Any more wishes? Any more wishing to comment? Councillor Snart.
Thank you. Very quickly, could I just make sure we put the same note on for about the healthcare and the actual what we put on the previous one as well, which is pooling the S106 monies if possible, and especially as I heard that the health centre at the moment can't be expanded. Just for interest, did we know why the county council education put a 7-year maximum on the transport policy for the education? Is that because the new school won't be ready for 7 years? Sorry.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. So the Section 106 is currently being finalised. So that time period for those contributions, sorry, the transport of the children, the Education Authority have advised a maximum of 7 years, presumably to cover themselves for the absolute maximum it may possibly be. So that 7-year figure isn't finalised, and obviously it's better to have a longer timescale if needed. So I presume that's why they've suggested 7 years, to sort of look at the absolute worst case scenario. But it would be a maximum of 7 years. It may be 1 year, 2 years.
And the other thing, this is about the land stability. On page 175, it says the LPA can then proceed to decision subject to any appropriate conditions or planning agreement. What does that mean?
Through you, Chair. So that's a quote from the government guidance on land stability. So in some circumstances, it would be necessary to secure something by condition or planning agreement. Now, it would depend on the stability and the risk that has been identified. So, for example, off the top of my head, if it was found that there was a significant risk, they may want to condition that further information was provided at reserve matters stage, for example. In this instance, or a certain part of the site was at high risk and another part of the site was at low risk, they would condition that only the area at low risk was appropriate for built development, for example. So it may be appropriate in some circumstances to have conditions on applications that where land stability risk is identified. But in this instance, we've taken advice and we've been advised that this is at low risk, and that from a planning authority point of view, we don't need to put anything on the planning permission. It'll be for building control to consider appropriate measures and whether they are appropriate at that stage, at the construction stage. So as a planning authority, we've identified that we don't need to do anything, but it may be that building control would need further information at that stage to consider whether specialist foundations are required, for example. But that's, not a planning matter, that's a matter for building control in this particular circumstance.
Just need to put a note on about, so we did clear that the securing the safe development rests with the developer and the landowner and not the actual LPA. I'm just a bit conscious that people will think that it's the LPA that have actually put these there if there is any problems. So it is actually clear in our actual response to say that it rests with the developer and or landowner. I think that is not clear really, and I think it should be.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we could add an informative onto a decision notice to make sure that was clearly stated. It is in national guidance as well, but yeah, we can certainly reiterate it.
Are there any more comments, please? Mr. Haynes.
I accept everything that Ms. Garbett has said about laws and regulations and so on. And I know there's nothing we can do about those, but as far as evidence is required, you don't get evidence until things are there. You won't know that you need extra parking until the cars are there to park, and that doesn't happen until the development's been built. You don't know you need a sports hall or youth facilities until the population is built up and you get an increase in antisocial behaviour and things for people. People need things to do. There is no evidence yet, but we do know it's going to happen, and we know these things are going to be needed. And it's a great shame that we can't do something about it in advance. I would have thought this is what planning was. And I'm sorry, but in this particular case, the law is an ass.
Thank you. Do you want a response from the officer? Councillor Matthews.
I'll make it brief. I think a lot of the questions are very similar to the previous application. I think it's more of a statement that I want to make than ask any questions, really. Again, listening to the parish council, I have a huge amount of sympathy with them and a huge amount of sympathy with the people of Barrow. My gut feeling is that Barrow's on the brink of buckling under its own weight. Sinking, that's a good word, yeah. It's sinking, buckling under its own weight, sinking. It seems to be the central hub in the villages surrounding the Loughborough area that seems to be the go-to point for everything and everyone at the moment. And there comes a point where the straw that breaks the camel's back, and the plan is from the developers is to build the houses in Barrow, but the infrastructure just isn't keeping up. And it's, when do we say enough? We've got to start thinking about other things as well as just building the houses, everything that goes with it. That if the education isn't in the right place, the long-term effect of that is catastrophic on the children, on the parents, the healthcare system. If the healthcare system can't cope, then what do people do? Where do they go? And it doesn't appear to me to be that two of the most fundamental things are keeping up. And the road network, Barrow's already a nightmare at rush hour, trying to get in and out. I don't know if you've ever tried it. I wouldn't if I were you. And they want to add to it. I'm just concerned that Barrow's going to buckle under its own weight sooner rather than later.
No need for violence. Do you want a response? I mean, it stands alone, doesn't it? Oh, you want to call?
If you'd like to make a response, it's fine. It's not necessary, but, you know, it'd be nice to hear something maybe.
Miss Garbutt.
Thank you, Chair. It's a similar response to before. We get infrastructure requests, and if they are sufficiently evidenced and still compliant, then we can ask for them as part of the 106 agreement. If we don't get the evidence to demonstrate how this development will lead to that need, then we can't ask for those requests. And like I said before, if it's an existing problem, this development can only contribute to how it's making an impact on that existing problem. It can't solve that existing problem. That's not the way the system works.
Councillor Infield.
We seem to be here very much because of the draft area plan. And we've heard that the draft area plan had considered a number of things, but it doesn't seem to have sufficiently considered the needs of Barrow or perhaps similar small town village centres around which a lot of new build is proposed. Many of us weren't around when the area plan was devised, and I personally, even before becoming a councillor, was very critical of the area plan for a lot of reasons, and it included some of these. And I think we just have to do better as a council when developing plans in the future. That's clear, because things, as we've heard today, are just not really working. And it seems the area plan is as very much at the core of that problem. It didn't really think about the issues of the scale of development that was being proposed by saying that's a nice field there, that can be lot number something, and that something else, and that something else, without really looking at where Barrow already was in terms of congestion and lack of facilities. And so it's just a hope that we could do better and that the processes that we follow could be more effective. Thank you.
Would you want a response? Thank you very much. I've got a question as well. You know how this is the opposite side of the one that's next to the Millennium Park, where you've got your footpaths and whatnot. This one has the bridleway crossing the road, and then I would have thought that there'd be quite an impact on the safety of people trying to cross the road and horses trying to cross the road with, what, 270 extra houses piling into Barrow. So is there any expectation that there will be some sort of a safe crossing for the children going to the new primary school and for the horses going up the bridleway?
Thank you, Chair. So this plan shows, I'm afraid in very small writing, there is a proposed crossing point across Melton Road. So just where that red line meets the Millennium Park, there's a little arrow that points to a crossing point there. And then further along at the north of the roundabout junction, there's dropped curbs proposed and a separation island there. So there are two crossing points proposed as part of the proposal. And again, there will be improvement works to the bridleway and to the public footpath to the south of the site where it links into into the site. Let me find there. So improvement works to the Bridleway, which is the purple line, and then improvement works to the green line to the south, the public footpath.
Talking about the crossing of the new road with the additional traffic from those two sites, where will the horses be safe to cross?
So the crossing point is where the Bridleway goes from one side of the road to the other. So that's the crossing that's been agreed by the Highways Authority as both the Rights of Way Authority and the Highways Authority.
What's a crossing point? Is it just a little island in the middle of the road? Or is it a proper crossing, like a zebra crossing, or the pedestrian crossing with lights?
It's an island by the looks of it from that plan. That is taken from the submitted plan that the Highways Authority have recommended for approval.
And did they know that there's a bridleway that crosses the road there? Did they mention it at all?
Yeah, it will have been considered in their consultation response, because they also, in that same consultation response, they've also recommended the improvement works to the Bridleway.
Are there any more comments? We have, have we had a proposal from anyone yet? Does anyone want to propose anything? We've got to make a decision as to what we do. Councillor Monk.
Chair, reluctantly again, I'm happy to go with officer's recommendation, but I just want to make one comment, and it's aimed at the developer actually. So if we're going to build, can we please build some bungalows, and particularly with the affordable housing aspect as well? Thank you.
So is that an amendment?
No.
Okay. Do I have a seconder?
Sorry, members, can I just seek clarification that the proposal is subject to the notes as recommended by Councillor Snart as well? Yeah. Oh, and the amendment to recommendation A for the bus pass contribution. Thank you.
All those in favour of accepting officers' recommendations A and B?
That's 5, Chair.
All those against?
That's 4, Chair.
I'm going to abstain again.
Okay, that motion is carried, Chair.
Thank you. We're now moving on to the list of applications determined under delegated powers, which is on page 264. It starts. Does the committee have any questions or comments about this part of the agenda? Councillor Smidovic.
I'm happy with all of it except one. I'm delighted with one as well. So, but it's not my ward, so I couldn't call it in or make any comment. But on page 269, it's the third one down, 58 Rockingham Road, change of use from dwelling house use class 3 to a class 2. And it worries me. It isn't time to go into it. It's not appropriate, but it's very, very controversial. 4 or 5 other councils in their planning have actually been raising it, and I was disappointed to see it under officer delegation, because I think the public need to know more about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smidowitz. Right, is there any other comments that people wish to make? Oh. No, please don't. In that case, I will close the meeting. Thank you very much. It's been a long one and lots to consider.